Hello, this is Jenna Taylor, and I'm going to introduce you to three different curriculum models. The first one we're going to look at is the Integrated Curriculum Model, or for short ICM. And this model is developed at the Center for Gifted Education at the College of William & Mary by Joyce Van Tassel Basca. So what is this model? Well, Van Tassel and her fellow researchers worked together to develop over 40 units in science, language arts, social studies, and math. So it's a curriculum all ready to go, ready to implement. And the units are based on three dimensions. You have advanced content, which focuses on accelerating the content the students have to take in. Process or product, and it mixes direct instruction with independent research. So the teacher's there to more guide the students through their research. And issues and themes, which allows your students to understand how they think, which oftentimes is missing. So they get their information, they research it, and then they also analyze how they're taking in that information as they research it. How does this model address the needs of gifted and talented students? Well, most of the units have performance-based assessments, which always push higher order thinking skills. Many of the units incorporate themes from many disciplines, so instead of just focusing on one subject, the units focus on several at once. It allows for independent pursuit of interest, so if a student wants to research a particular topic, there is opportunity for that. So there's some flexibility there. The textbook that we're using in class states the curriculum addresses precocity, intensity, and complexity of thinking. So basically what this is saying is that a lot of the gifted students are more mature than their similar aged peers, and they may be more advanced in their thinking. And so a lot of the units cater to that. There's also an emphasis on debate and discussion, which is missing in a lot of traditional classrooms. A lot of times the focus is on delivering content and then testing retention of content, and there's not really an opportunity to talk about the material and discuss whether we agree or disagree and support that with evidence. The research that supports this model, of course, Van Tassel has been researching and developing this model for a while, but according to the textbook, this model is the most extensively researched curriculum model available. And mostly that's due in part to the fact that it's been funded by the government and various foundations for 20 years. Of course, when you have funding for 20 years, you can do tons of research. And there have been several studies, of course, conducted by Van Tassel. A lot of my research and what you'll see in this video is based on a study featured in the Roper Review, and that study was conducted by several people, and I'm not even going to attempt to say some of these names, but there they are listed. Now, the people that I gather benefit from this model the most are the districts who can afford the materials and teacher training. So of course with 40 units of curriculum, you can imagine that the materials can be expensive. And of course, what good is all these resources if you haven't trained teachers to use them properly? Private schools, I think, would benefit from this as well because they don't necessarily have to adhere strictly to state standards. So with a set curriculum such as this is so structured, if it doesn't apply directly to a state standards, you might not be able to use it. But private schools have some flexibility there. And then also, the students that benefit the most are students who stay in the program long term. There's a real focus on in-depth and repetition, and so students who can stay in the program for a longer period of time tend to benefit the most, and that's what the research suggests, that several years in the program is where you see the most improvement. The strengths of this model. The study in Roper Review cited an increase in achievement in literary analysis, persuasive writing, and grammar. And so that is definitely a strength because those are areas that generally are lacking in schools today. There's also an improvement in scientific research skills. So this is a definite strength, because I know, at least with our school, with such short periods, only 55 minutes, the science classes have a really hard time putting labs into place and things like that. So scientific research doesn't really happen a lot, because there's just not a lot of time to allow the students to really research the material in depth. Teachers said they frequently employed higher order thinking skills, student discussions, individual and group project work, which is always difficult to integrate into the traditional classroom today. The top benefits that were listed in the article were organization, scope and sequence, and peer interaction. So of course it's already set, ready to go. You just copy the materials and hand them out. Of course, scope and sequence is already set for you when you cover a lot of material, because it's accelerated. And of course there's lots of discussion and projects for kids to work together on. The weaknesses I noticed, or that were stated in the article I read, was there was a lack of flexibility and a lack of variety of reading materials. They also needed more materials to improve their own background knowledge of the content. So they felt like the reading materials were kind of repetitive, and in addition to that, some of the material might be more in depth than the teachers are equipped to go into. So the teachers were requesting some materials just for them, so that they have a little background information about the different topics. So when students ask questions, they can be a resource. The students in the article that were surveyed stated they wanted a broader range of reading materials. So again, the lack of variety in the reading materials. And they wanted to be able to choose their reading materials. Freedom of choice, which is a big deal for gifted and talented. They also wanted the material to be delivered in a more lively manner, so connecting with stories, movies, jokes, riddles, field trips. So that kind of falls upon the teacher more so than the curriculum itself. And then parents, in the article, their criticism was that the curriculum was too dependent on teacher delivery. There needed to be more training for teachers to remedy the inconsistencies. So one teacher may take the material and make it really dynamic, and another maybe not so much. And so it seemed like across the board, teachers, students, and parents were all kind of saying the same thing. So that's the analysis of the integrated curriculum model. Our next model is the school-wide enrichment model in reading. So in our textbook, we do see the school-wide enrichment model, but an article that I read focused on the reading element, and then also Renzulli learning. So the SEMR and Renzulli learning brought together. And this is a model based on the school-wide enrichment model. Of course, it is in our textbook that was developed by Joseph Renzulli at the University of Connecticut. So this curriculum model focuses a lot on reading, and it's designed to match students with reading materials they choose, which are slightly above their reading level. And the whole purpose is to improve their reading and thinking skills. Of course, it uses the 3 types of enrichment from the school-wide enrichment model. Type 1, general exploration. Type 2, instruction and skills necessary to work independently. And Type 3, self-directed projects. So you start with students exploring the different areas they may want to read books about. The teacher then focuses that in and make sure the students have the skills they need to actually do the work independently. And then after that, of course, you have the self-directed projects. And the teacher works with each student individually to guide that student towards the higher order thinking skills. So there's constant monitoring and modifying one-on-one between the teacher and the student. Renzulli Learning is actually an online interface, so it's not so much a curriculum but a tool that's designed to take students' interests and learning styles and match them with online resources. So the 3 steps are: there's a computer-based diagnostic assessment. So the students take basically a survey that's assessing their interest and their styles. And then once they take that, the student gets a profile, and from that profile, a search engine will match their strengths and interests to enrichment activities and resources. So it's just, again, matching students' interests and styles with resources online. And then after the student explores these resources, the Renzulli Learning Interface compiles all that information into the total talent portfolio. And basically what that is a portfolio that kind of shows the students' work all together, that students, teachers, and parents can all look at. And then from there, they can use that with the Wizard project element of the online interface to choose a project for the student to work on independently. So it takes them through the 3 stages for Renzulli learning. They get to explore, and then they get to hone in the skills that they need, and then of course they work on an independent project. So this model addresses needs of gifted and talented students in various ways. It promotes autonomy and higher order thinking skills. The kids are working independently a lot, so there's a lot of room for responsibility and decision making. There's plenty of opportunities for differentiated instruction. So the teacher is working with each individual student on their individualized work. They're all reading things that they're individually interested in and pursuing projects that are based on their individual interests. There's a focus on the process of learning, not just content. So while the kids are learning about all these things they're interested in, they're also reflecting on how they're learning that material. They learn to evaluate resources and the level of challenge of material. So if they choose a book that they want to read, teachers help them assess whether or not that book is at their reading level, or if it's a little higher, or if it's actually below their level. And so students are constantly getting the opportunity to evaluate whether a book is challenging them. And then it's the same with resources, especially online with the Renzulli learning component. They learn whether it's actually teaching them something or it's just an activity to pass time. And then they're always challenged to read a step above their comfort zone. So that kind of falls on the teacher to push the kids to read a book that might have some material or some words that they're not familiar with, but to stick with it because the topic interests them. So the research that supports this model. There are a lot of studies cited in the article that I read to research this, and it's featured in the New England Reading Association Journal. There are several studies conducted by, I think this is pronounced Reyes, and Field, focusing on teacher perceptions and Internet's influence on reading fluency. So the studies definitely show growth in reading comprehension in all types of socioeconomic settings. So it's one of the things that the article talked a lot about was the SEMR model in conjunction with Renzulli's learning online interface opened up an opportunity for students from all socioeconomic backgrounds to push themselves at their own individual reading levels, to learn things that interest them depending on their cultural background and things like that, but at the same time being given material that was at their particular level. So who benefits from this model? Well, the program provides enrichment and talent development for all students. So even though gifted students can benefit greatly, there's also opportunity for general education students to participate. Of course, those who are gifted and talented benefit from the accelerating part of the process. So they reach independent study much sooner than general education students. But of course, this process can benefit any student. This benefits the underserved populations within the gifted and talented category because of the differentiated learning. So If a student is gifted but maybe behind due to their socioeconomic status, they can catch up because of their personalized learning plan. They also can explore their personal interests and build their reading skills while they're doing it. And logistically, the schools that would benefit are those with a very active media center staff, of course, because students are reading and you need a media center staff that's knowledgeable about all the resources out there. Also small classes, because the teacher has to monitor students one-on-one, and that's multiple times a week, and that's really only possible when you have a small class. Also, there's an emphasis on literacy, obviously, with the reading program, and so really schools that have grant funding would benefit from this, because they would be able to afford the resources necessary to successfully implement the program. And also, the school must have access to a variety of materials, especially technology. If they are going to use the Renzulli online interface as a tool, then of course students need access to computers and the internet. The strengths, of course, there's flexibility of implementation because of the online component. The program can start small and build as students and teachers are more comfortable. So you could just have students reading a few times a week for a short amount of time, and then grow from there. There's a lot of opportunity to differentiate instruction, again, because of the one-on-one element with teachers and students. There's a focus on the process of learning, not just taking in new content. It encourages the use of technology, which is really important in today's world. And then there's an emphasis on student strength and interest, as opposed to finding weaknesses and correcting them. So instead of constantly bombarding students with, this is what you're lacking, let's work on this, it's, this is what you're interested in and good at, so let's work on that. The weaknesses, there is so many materials that are necessary, books, access to technology, so that can really limit the schools who can participate. Other subjects maybe have to be sacrificed to fully implement the program. With so much time spent on individual projects, something might have to fall by the wayside in order to find time for students to do the things they need to do. It can be really difficult to assess. So in today's world, we're driven to put a grade on things, and so it can be difficult to create a structure to grade a student's progress. A weakness is the need for one-on-one conferences with students multiple times a week. It's very difficult with today's class size. And then students, of course, have to be self-motivated anytime they work individually. And so that's just a quick overview of the school-wide enrichment model for reading in conjunction with Renzulli Learning. The last model I researched is called structured tinkering. It was developed in England, and I'm basing my research on an article I found written by Deborah Iyer. And in the article, basically she explains that structured tinkering is a systematic approach to the modification of the basic school curriculum to meet the needs of gifted and talented pupils. And so basically, from the article, what I learned is that this approach focuses on taking the curriculum that already exists in a school and tinkering with it so that you modify it to accommodate gifted and talented students. And it focuses on differentiation, especially the idea that students can have different areas of giftedness, and also it's a teacher-driven curriculum change. So the changes rely very heavily on the teachers. This model addresses the needs of gifted and talented students in various ways. There's a major focus on differentiated instruction. So a student who may be gifted in one area will benefit because they will get that instruction in that one area that they need to push their skills further. There's a lot of opportunity for socialization because this curriculum is implemented in the general education classroom. So gifted students stay with their general curriculum peers, which means they don't miss out on learning about all the different cultures and different students from different walks of life available within a school. Also, there are many opportunities for acceleration, mastery of a skill, and enrichment. The research that supports this model, Deborah Iyer has worked for over 20 years with schools in England to implement this approach. So it's kind of like the ICM in that way, that it's been developed over a very long period of time. And what motivated all this was the House of Commons Education Select Committee reported that there needed to be more provisions for gifted and talented students. And so this is one of the responses to that. And the various studies by Eyre and England's Department of Education have confirmed that there's improvement due to the model's implementation. So who benefits? Students who are gifted in select areas rather than in the traditional academic sense. So a student who may be gifted in, let's say, music, but not necessarily math and science, can still have access to a gifted curriculum despite their lack of giftedness in certain areas. All Gen Ed students have access to the same enrichment opportunities as the gifted students, so they benefit as well. The teachers benefit because there's more autonomy, and teachers are seen as masters in their craft and experts. Schools who have a dedicated curriculum coach benefit from this model because they have a person dedicated to constantly analyzing the curriculum and improving it. And then, of course, schools with dedicated staff and faculty that are interested in putting in the time and energy to make the changes to the curriculum to suit individual needs. The focus is on differentiation, and if there's not a staff and faculty that are willing to put in the time to differentiate the curriculum, this model is not for them. The strengths, there's tons of flexibility. It's very cost effective. There's no required materials or anything like that. It modifies and enhances curriculum already written instead of starting from scratch. So instead of bringing in something completely new, it takes what you're already doing and improves it. It offers enrichment to all students, not just gifted. And the changes are small and slowly implemented, which as a teacher I can appreciate. There's tons of opportunity for differentiation. It eliminates issues with curriculum continuity and progression. So in the article it talked about how often with pull-out programs, a gifted student may go to this program during the day where they're working on really in-depth projects and things that interest them, and then they go back into the general education classroom and it's completely different, where it might be seen as stagnant or uninteresting. And so when you are enriching the curriculum in the general education classroom, you really eliminate that gap between the gifted program and the general education program. The changes made are constantly evaluated in a structured way, and so as they're evaluated, they're assessed whether they're useful or not, and if they're not, they're thrown out, and if they are, they're put permanently into place. And then the general education students are made to feel the general students, so general education students are not made to feel less because gifted are not separated. So oftentimes when you have the gifted and talented in a separate program, the students who are not in that program have a noted reaction to where they feel like they're less because they're not in the gifted category. And so if you don't pull the gifted students out, you don't have that. Weaknesses. Implementation can be complex and time-consuming because you're constantly reflecting and tweaking and changing, and so in addition to having to teach your day-to-day classes, you've got to constantly reflect upon what you did and make changes. It's dependent upon training for teachers. So because the curriculum model is so dependent on teachers differentiating their curriculum for their individual classes, then they need to be trained on how to do that. And so, of course, training is always a difficult thing to make happen, especially if you have limited funding. It relies heavily on teacher participation. So if teachers aren't buying into the curriculum, you're not going to have their support, and you really need that for this curriculum model. And then the implementation must be driven by strong school leadership. So if your school leadership, your administrators, your curriculum instructor, if they aren't supportive of this type of curriculum, it's not really going to work, because you need a school-wide effort to look at what you do and to personalize the curriculum to that school. And so that concludes my presentation of the 3 curriculum models, and these are my sources.